Show me what you got.
Welcome into the second episode of To Be Frank. I'm Jake Reiser.
I'm Dan Schulman.
I'm Jordan Tebow.
And this week we are talking athletes in media. Our guests last week during the Broadcast Sports Journalism Seminar were Boston Celtics writer on NBA.com Ian Thompson and Boston Celtics player Jaylen Brown with Celtics media coordinator Jeff Twiss. It was certainly an interesting seminar to listen to them, and it really brings up an interesting discussion about how to gain better relationships with athletes as a member of the media, how to get the best information out of them, and kind of how to build up trust with the team.
Yeah, and I mean, it was cool to have Jaylen Brown come in because I was watching the Celtics game the night before, seeing him put up great numbers, and then the next night he's talking to us just like a normal person in our class. And the best thing about it is he's 20 years old, but he carries himself like he's so much older. He's very mature, well-spoken, very learned kid. I mean, he took a grad course his freshman year at UCal Berkeley, so I mean, and he's taking summer classes at Harvard. Obviously knows what he's talking about, a good head on his shoulders, and he surrounds himself with the right people.
Yeah, and speaking of well-spoken, Ian Thompson, just every single word that came out of his mouth was, very calculated, very calm, and he knew exactly what to say to our young, aspiring journalistic minds. And I think a lot of what Ian said really resonated with Jaylen. You could see Jaylen, shaking his head, in a positive way, everything that Ian said. And just to see them two in the same room together and go back to back, I think was huge for us, seeing as, I think half of us in the class hadn't even talked to a professional sports athlete in a professional setting before.
I mean, I can look at the three of us and say we all cover the men's hockey team here at BU in some sort of way, and they're not a professional team, I'll call them, because they're a college hockey team. They're run through the university, but the way that the organization is run, it's as close as you're going to get to a professional sports team. And so I can say that for what we've all been able to do, we've kind of had to put some of these skills to the test about developing relationships with these guys, making sure that we're working with the sports information director about interviews and trying to draw out the most information possible. So it's not like we haven't had the venues to be able to put these skills to the test.
And Jake, I know you and I have had experience in NHL locker rooms with Morning Skate interviewing players before games. So, I mean, it's actually very similar to what you go through in college through sports information directors. Instead, you have the media relations director in professional sports setting. You have to email them, make sure that you're all set, and they run it by the player. Obviously, if it's okay with them, it's fine. But that actually kind of leads into what the big takeaway from this seminar was, and that is the fine line between sports and real life. Now, Jake, what we have done before, going into NHL locker rooms and asking the players about their college experience is, I guess it's a bit unorthodox, I think you could say.
Yeah, I think it is. And, sometimes you go in there. I was just in the Maple Leafs locker room earlier last week, and I was talking with James Van Riemsdyk, who went to the University of New Hampshire. And he's getting questions about the team's play thus far and where the Maple Leafs might stand in the playoffs. And then I go up to him and I say, does being in this building remind you of some Hockey East memories of being at New Hampshire? And he looks and he kind of puts a smile on his face. So maybe we come off as like, oh, we're just going to ask the same simple questions. But I think that coming from a different angle that we have with talking about college experiences really kind of puts guys at ease a little bit.
Yeah, and Jaylen, at the very end, he thanked us and said, thanks, guys, very much. It makes me feel like I'm back in college again. And I think, there's so many one-and-dones in so many different leagues. And, a lot of players miss that opportunity. And to ask Jaylen, about, these sort of questions when he's 20 years old, he's younger than all of us. Everybody in the room was older than Jaylen. And, for him to come back to BU and talk to college students like that, I think was probably a refreshing experience for him. But, and like you said, when you ask players questions like that, it brings them back and kind of makes them, come back to a positive time in their life. And that's what Jaylen said he had at Cal. And he also said he's enrolling at classes at Harvard. So, and to get that out of him was pretty special. And, another thing that you guys were talking about with the BU hockey team and going through the sports information director, what a treat was it for us to have Jeff Twiss there to talk about and kind of intervene on questions that we asked Ian and Jaylen about the specifics of how to get an interview, And one of the things that Twist said was, I'm with Jalen the whole day. I see him come into the building. If he's ticked off, if he looks like he's happy, maybe today isn't the day for an interview, or maybe today is the day for an interview. So I think that's the other thing. These players, they can't just be pushed and pulled each way whenever you want them to. It needs to be a good circumstance for both of you.
And, that comes with a lot of strategy on our end, too, that, all these interviews aren't going to be sunshine and rainbows. We're going to have to ask some tough questions sometimes about injuries, about their personal life, and it's a matter of where we want to draw the line and where the players want to draw the line, and then how to approach it. I think it's certainly inappropriate to ask questions like this after a game, but it's about going to a practice and going to morning skates multiple times and trying to establish a rapport with the player that really kind of makes it easier to ask those tough questions, but it's still just so tough to really get in there.
Yeah, and one big thing that I remember talking to Kevin Duffy after last week's seminar, the week before, and he's saying that probably one of the better ways to maintain a relationship with a coach is to talk about stuff that isn't the sport, which I think here kind of throws in a bit of a conflict, because now you're having to ask about real life situations or whatever, and that's just the same thing that we were told to do in order to keep a relationship with a coach. Now we're being told to be careful of that and to be able to draw the fine line. So while it is okay to ask about real life questions, like in the locker room after an interview, just like, oh, by the way, how's the family and stuff like that. If you're talking to Tom Brady, maybe, and if you have a rapport with Tom Brady, of course, that's fine. But you can't go into a locker room and ask somebody who just had a family controversy a tough question right away. You have to A, have a rapport, and B, there has to be a time and place.
Yeah, and like you said, I was watching the press conference after the Super Bowl, and it was the Monday morning press conference with Tom Brady when he accepted his MVP award, and somebody asked him about his mom's, and her being there the first game she's been to all season, and Brady's not the guy to say, oh, don't ask me about my mom, and that's a big moment for him. He stepped up, he answered the question. But like you said, you need to build rapports with these people. You need to be there every day. Like Ian said, you need to treat these people like you want to be treated, because that's who they are. They're people just like you. And if you're there every day and you show that you care and that and you have done your homework, then chances are the player's going to answer some questions for you and not be completely off-putting.
Sometimes it's just about saying hi.
Yep.
Just going up to a guy and saying, hey, my name's Jake. I write for Stanley Cup of Chatter. It's nice to meet you. Or seeing the two guys. I was standing behind you, Dan, at the Beanpot on Monday, and I saw Oscar Andrin and Shane Switzer walk by, who were both scratched for the game. And I just turned around and said, hey, guys, how's it going tonight? And they both said, hey, Jake, how you doing? And sometimes it's just about making a little connection like that, not shying away from it. That will help in the future.
It's amazing how far a handshake and eye contact can go, especially in this industry. It goes a long way, it really does, because you look someone in the eye, you give them a handshake, say, hi, my name's Dan. How you doing? Good to meet you. Stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Right there, they know you're a professional. You carry yourself in a professional way. You're willing to, introduce yourself to them, be courageous, which, I mean, is something, especially at our age, that it's tough to find in a young journalist. I mean, most of the time they're just to themselves, very focused on what the task is at hand. But if you make that connection, and if you are courageous and introduce yourself to the big wigs and the legendary reporters, then I think right away they realize, okay, this kid knows what he's doing. He's professional. He's respectful. He's going to be good.
It makes you a human being and not a walking, talking mic stand.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and that's another thing that Frank was saying, the whole human mic stand thing. And you really need to be integrated into the system, and it doesn't matter if you're just writing a feature about a team like Ian does, about a player like Ian does, and then you go over to a different team to write a feature for a player on that team. You still need to care and be there and be knowledgeable about every single thing you're writing. And on the player side, for Jalen to come and spend those 2 hours for us, we need to realize that that's 2 hours of his life, that he either cherishes or he never gets back. It's every single day he's up. He brought us through his day. He wakes up early, He works out, goes and shoots around, does film, goes and shoots around, works out, then takes a nap, and then he's at BU. He said, Jeff was at my door when I woke up. So they get pushed and pulled every way, but you got to realize that the time that he's giving you and the time that you're taking away from him, it's important, and you got to use it to the best of your ability.
And I think it was great that Jalen opened up to us later on in the podcast, because at first you could tell he was a bit shy. He didn't really know what to expect. But then as it went on and he opened up and became a little more personable, his answers were terrific. I thought he was unbelievable, as was Ian Thompson. Ian Thompson's probably one of the best, if not the best, NBA reporters out there. And everything he said to us was completely invaluable.
Yeah, I mean, I was clinging on to every word. I just wanted him to keep talking. He's got such a great voice. Ian does, and Jalen, he had his two cousins. I think he called them. I don't know if they were actually his cousins or if that was like, him saying like these are my brothers. But he had them with him, and they were taking videos and pictures of him. Not sure what for. Maybe trying to show that Jalen's been with students and trying to help out other students, because like we said, he's 20, and to get that mix, the young with Ian, he's been around the league for a while. He's interviewed Michael Jordan. He sat next to Larry Bird. That was definitely important for us to see. And it's funny, Ian's never done an interview with Jalen, so for them to sit in the same room together and mesh that well was incredible.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up here. But first, final thoughts. What's the one biggest takeaway you got from last week's seminar?
Well, I think it really is that there's a fine line between sports and life, and it's about distinguishing that. And yes, sometimes you are going to have to ask the fine questions, or the tough questions, but you need to find a time and a place when that's right. You can't go out firing with tough questions, because these players are people too, just like us. And I mean, something that Frank Shore said in his blog is, can you imagine yourself being in a cubicle or sitting in your office and having phones in front of you and recorders in front of you, people coming up to you like that? I mean, that's where an athlete is. That's their office. That's their job. And I know Jeff Twist said something very similar to that as well. So it's about, finding a time and a place to ask the tough questions, being able to draw the fine line between life and sports and what's necessary to ask and what's not.
I got to go with something that Jeff Twist said, and Dan, it's something you brought up earlier in the show about sometimes the player's having a good day. I believe it was Jordan. Sometimes the player's having a good day. Sometimes the player's having a bad day. And so something that I started to realize is sometimes it's not your fault if a player's not available. Sometimes you're just going to be asking an innocuous question. You're going to be asking the right things, and maybe it's just not his day. As much as sports is an enterprise and these teams are businesses, everyone's a human being, like you said, Dan. And sometimes it might just not be your day because the player's having a rough day. Maybe he got into an accident on the way here. Maybe he just wasn't feeling too good and he wanted to get home. So sometimes it's just not your fault, and everything you got to take with a grain of salt and learn that these people are just as much human beings as you are, and kind of roll with it and keep going.
The biggest thing that I took was from Jalen. Frank had asked him a question. Said, Jalen, what's worse? What were you thinking when you hit that play, or what was it like when you made that basket? I think, like, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. Our time's so valuable. Their time's so valuable. There's only so much that you can ask in so little time. And if you're going to ask a question, you have to make it so that it's, it's valuable and it says something about the person that you're talking to. And for you to just go up and ask, Tom Brady, what were you thinking on that last quarter drive? They don't know. They're out there. They're doing their jobs. They're playing how they want to play. And maybe formulate your question in a better way to get something out of the player in the little time that you have with them. And another thing that I got out of it was, Jeff Twist, just how integrated the media services are with the players and how much they know about their players. He picked up Jalen at his house, and maybe not all sports information directors are like that, but I just thought it was interesting to see Jeff intervene in all, in some of the questions and try to add that expert's take into it.
Jordan, Dan, always a pleasure.
Yes.
Stick around next week for the next episode of To Be Frank, where we will be talking about the seminar with Nesson's Zach Cox and Boston.com's Brian Robb. But for now, alongside Dan Shulman and Jordan Tebow, I'm Jake Reiser, signing off.
I like what you got. Good job.